Okay, welcome back to our discussion on the Scarlet letter. This is my third video. We have earlier discussed on sin, punishment, and redemption. There we try to understand the basic idea of sin, the differences between an instinctive sin and an intentional sin. Then we also try to understand that how these three main characters of this novel are connected with the very idea of sin. Hester Prynne and Arthur Dimmesdale, who committed adultery, are sinners of one kind. And on the other hand, the husband who did not commit adultery, who seems to be a very good man, and he is not popularly known as a sinner. He is believed to have committed adultery. So I just try to look out to see what the people are doing outside. This is the corona time, people are supposed to roam around. Anyways, so let's come back to our discussion. So we have three main characters, and we actually have three sinners in this novel. And the husband did not commit adultery, but he does not have that essential feeling of being a sinner, and he dies unconfessed. So the idea of redemption is crucial here. So we had a very thorough discussion about that earlier in my first video. And as you did not ask any questions, so I believe that you understood my discussion, and you can take preparations on that. And now let's talk about, then we talked about symbols, the significance of the symbols used in this novel. And we try to discuss the main symbols of this novel, starting with Scarlet letter, prison, scaffold, the black man, etc., etc. And the third topic that we need to take preparation on is a comparative analysis, a comparative discussion between these two male characters, Arthur Dimmesdale and Roger Chillingworth. These are the two male characters who were involved with Hester Prynne with two different claims. One was her husband, the other was her lover. Though we may have a very serious discussion that whether as husband or as lover they performed their responsibilities, their duties well with Hester Prynne or not. But if you are asked a question that who is a more agreeable character between these two, Arthur Dimmesdale or Roger Chillingworth? Yes, if you are asked this question, I think you will be divided into two. A good number of you would go with the husband, taking adultery as a very serious sin, and of course, with your logic, with your rational understanding of human relationship and responsibilities. Hester Prynne was a married woman. Her husband was not with her, and she didn't have any information about her husband. And she apprehended that her husband must have died. But with that apprehension, she developed a relationship with another man. Quite interestingly, the man with whom she had that relationship was nobody but the most talented preacher of that community. Can you accept that? And if you ask that, how did that preacher get involved with Hester Prynne, knowing that adultery is a very serious sin? As he was a preacher, he knew that very well, that adultery is one of the cardinal sins, and he must not commit adultery. So there will be a good number of you who would support the husband and would blame Arthur Dimmesdale, who committed adultery, and would not have any sympathy for him. And you may side with the husband with your arguments that the husband has got every right to take revenge against the man with whom his wife had that sinful relationship, or who, in his own words, who fouled him so miserably. The man who cuckolded him. Cuckolded, the meaning of the word cuckold. You check it in the dictionary. So, Arthur Dimmesdale cuckolded him by having a relationship with his wife. So there will be a good number of you who would support the husband. There will be also a good number of you, some of you, and the novelist, you'll find the novelist with you in your group, who has all his sympathy for the lover, for Arthur Dimmesdale. And say you may try to take it as an accident, that the relationship, the sexual relationship, the unlawful physical relationship between Hester Prynne and Arthur Dimmesdale is quite an accident. And both of them seem to be repentant for that. Both of them seem to feel sorry for that. And as we know that to err is human, to err is human. We commit errors, we commit mistakes. And even in the scripture it is said that he is the best among the mankind who, after committing a mistake, feels sorry for the mistake. And here comes the idea of confession. In Christian theology, confession means if you commit a sin, you must feel sorry for that, and you must confess. There is a process of confession in front of a confessor. In Islamic terminology, we understand it as tawbah and istighfar. Tawbah and istighfar. These are two different things you must understand. Tawbah and istighfar. Combinedly, this tawbah and istighfar makes confession. So tawbah means you must feel istighfar first. So you must feel sorry for what you have done. You must feel sorry for your sin. Sorry for the thing that you have done, that you know that it is wrong. And tawbah means that you come to a conviction. You come to your to a decision that you are not going to repeat it in your life. You are not going to repeat the same sin in your life. So this is a decision that you would not do it again in your life. So this is confession in Christian theology. So both of the adulterers, Hester Prynne and Arthur Dimmesdale, Hester in her own way, Arthur in his own way, in a different way, confess. So that's why some of you might also feel sorry and sympathetic towards Dimmesdale. So this is the way we are also conflicted. We are also confused with the very idea of selecting or voting for any of these two, selecting a better man from these two. If we are asked that who is more agreeable as a human being from these two, we are confused. We don't have an easy answer. So if you discuss, say, the problems of Arthur Dimmesdale. Number one, in chapter 2, we see when Hester Prynne comes out of the prison for her trial, she is asked to climb up the scaffold. She stands on the scaffold. And Arthur Dimmesdale is given the responsibility to deal with her sin. In the beginning, he was quite unwilling to deal with the case, and the people of her community are so mistaken with his gesture. They have taken it as say, his oversensitiveness, his being so pious, so innocent, so holy. And people say that her Master Dimmesdale, her godly pastor, take it grievous to his heart to deal with such a scandal on his day of congregation, more or less. So the description comes like this, that the Dimmesdale was not liking with the idea to deal with the case of Hester Prynne, because it's something very very bad. He feels very bad to talk about such a sin, such an ugly thing, such a unholy thing on the very day of his congregation. But with the repeated request from the other ministers, Arthur Dimmesdale finally agrees to deal with Hester Prynne. But quite interestingly, as we know that he is a very good speaker, when he talks to Hester Prynne, when he addresses Hester Prynne, it is only Hester Prynne who understands the inner implications of his appeal, the inner meaning of his discourse. And we discussed in the class, the text is not in front of me, so I cannot read it out. But there is an essential, hint that he successfully transmitted to Hester Prynne not to disclose his identity. So Hester Prynne, after listening to his appeal, to his discourse, Hester Prynne responds negatively. She says that she would not disclose the identity of the man with whom she had that relationship. All the people of her community became very angry with her. The magistrates became angry. And we know that in the crowd, she also finds her husband there standing after a long time, more than a year. He also proclaims from the crowd, "O woman, give your child a father." That means give the identity of the father of your child. Your father has got every right to know her father. So this is the way there was enormous pressure on her, but she says that she would not disclose the identity of the man with whom she had that relationship. And she said that, okay, my daughter would know the divine father, no earthly father. She would not recognize an earthly one, means an earthly father. She would not require an earthly father either. So this is the way the novel continues. And what we actually wanted to discuss here, bring into consideration here, is that Arthur Dimmesdale was not that courageous to admit his guilt, to admit his sin. We know Hester Prynne received the punishment given to her. The punishment was to put on a scarlet letter on her bosom. The scarlet A symbolizing adultery, right? So A symbolizes adultery. So this is the mark of sin. This is the mark of punishment. This is a mark of ignominy and public humiliation. So to a lady, this is a very serious punishment. Though the people of her community, predominantly the women of her community, were not happy with that punishment. They wanted something more serious. Even some people said that she must have died. And some said that they should have branded the hot iron on her forehead instead of giving a letter A to put on her gown. But Hester Prynne did never challenge the order of her community. She accepts the punishment given to her and she puts it onto her bosom. But quite interestingly, she embroidered the letter A in fine gold. So here we find the difference of attitude. So something that has been given as something that has been identified as a sin is not altogether a sin to Hester Prynne. She has her own way of interpreting this. She has her own way of looking at her relationship. And the relationship that has been branded as a sinful relationship, to her, this is more than a sin. So when the elderly preacher told her that if you disclose the identity of your lover, we will take the scarlet off, O-double-F, off. She said, it is too deeply branded. You cannot take it off. So, to Hester Prynne, this letter A is not only a mark of sin. This is more than a sin. To the community, this letter A represents adultery. To Hester Prynne, who knows, it might represent Arthur, the man with whom she had that emotional engagement, emotional relationship, so intimate a relationship. So we were talking about Arthur Dimmesdale. So he was less courageous, for sure, but he suffers from guilty conscience, that is for sure. So he's not a villain here. We have all human beings here. So he suffers from guilty conscience, and there might be much discussion that why did he commit an adulterous relationship. He was a bachelor. Why was he bachelor? Whether it was his own decision or it was a social norm that a preacher like him is recommended not to have a family, not to get involved in a familial relationship, not to have a wife. So if it is so we may have, say, another, say, scope of discussion that whether Arthur Dimmesdale was alone responsible for his sin, or the community, or the social norm, the Christian Orthodox religion, the way the religion promoted the bachelorhood for the preachers is also responsible. So there might be much discussion on that. So we are not going to that. So he was a bachelor, and but in chapter 17 we see, after suffering from guilty conscience, enormous psychological pressure, in chapter 17 when Hester Prynne meets him in the forest, tells him that it was her husband Roger Chillingworth who was actually in the disguise of a friend punishing Arthur Dimmesdale. So Arthur Dimmesdale didn't know him. Arthur Dimmesdale didn't know Hester's husband. So he requested Hester earlier in chapter 12, we know, that if she knows, she can disclose the identity of that man. He said that I shiver at his presence. I don't like his presence. I don't like the way he talks. So he creates psychological pressure on me. So it was Roger Chillingworth who, after knowing the identity of Arthur Dimmesdale as the other sinner, started inflicting pain on him, psychological pressure on him, other than taking a direct revenge, other than taking a direct punishment. So in chapter 17 we see, quite interestingly, Arthur Dimmesdale said that after an emotional conversation, Arthur Dimmesdale finally said that, I forgive you, Hester, and let God forgive us both. You and I are not the worst sinners in the world. Somebody else's sin is blacker than the sin of this polluted priest. He was talking about himself. Somebody else's sin. Who is that somebody else? The husband he was referring to. Somebody else's sin is blacker than the sin of this polluted priest. He broke the sanctity of a human heart in cold blood. Remember, in cold blood. Thou and I never did so. So here he clearly says that he and Hesterbrine, these two adulterers, are not the worst sinners in this world. Somebody else's sin is blacker than the sin of these adulterers. And this somebody else is the husband, who is not known to be a sinner in the society, but Arthur Dimmesdale says that his sin is blacker than the sin of this polluted priest, means the sin of adultery. His sin is blacker than adultery, more serious, worse a sin than adultery. Do you agree with Arthur Dimmesdale or not? That's the main question. So here, this very comment is the most important comment on sin, the idea of sin. And on the other hand, Roger Chillingworth, we talk about Roger Chillingworth, the husband, who left his wife alone, who sent his wife to America with other pilgrims with a promise that he would join her shortly, but did not join her even in a year. So what happened to him? He did not die, though the wife thought that he must have died, otherwise he would have joined her, because he promised to join her shortly. So what happened to him? He went to America, but other than meeting his wife, he started living with the Red Indians. Why? Only to learn the use of herbs, the use of medicine, herbal medicine. And once his education is over, once he learned the use of herbs, then only he felt that he must meet his wife. But by now, many things happened. The wife developed another relationship. So in chapter 3, we see the husband coming back. So was the husband sensible enough? Was he a responsible husband? So we have reasons to blame him. We have reasons not to take him, not to consider him as a sensible, reasonable, dutiful husband. So he was more intellectual and less emotional, that is for sure. And he failed to set the priority of life. But he is not also a villain. He is also a human being. Because in chapter 14, yes, when Hesterbrine decided that he would not remain silent, he would not keep her husband's identity secret to Arthur Dimmesdale, and he would meet Dimmesdale to tell about her husband. So before that, he met her husband in chapter 14. She meets Dimmesdale in chapter 17. But before that, she meets her husband in chapter 14. And there she spoke out her mind that I have duties for other human beings too. So I would no longer keep your identity secret. Then the husband becomes a bit emotional and talks about himself, about the past life they passed together. And there he said, was I not kind to you? Was I not true to you? Was my life not dedicated to the service of humanity? So he talked about himself. And we find that Hesterbrine attests that yes, you are a good human being, and you had many more good things than that has been claimed, than what you have claimed right now. So from Hester's attestation to all the good qualities of her husband, we also come to understand that the husband was not a bad man too. He was also a good man. His life was dedicated to the service of humanity, but probably he failed to make a balance between these two, family and work. And but quite pathetically, towards the end of this novel, we see the husband claims that he transforms himself into a fiend because his ugly revenge, his motive of dark revenge made him a fiend. Finally, at the end of this novel, we see the husband dies unconfessed, without confession. On the other hand, Arthur Dimmesdale, who in the beginning of this novel did not have that courage to declare about his sin in public, to confess in public, but towards the end of this novel in 23rd chapter, quite surprisingly, he climbs up the scaffold and declares in public that he is the other sinner the community has been looking for this long 7 years. So after 7 years, he made his confession in public, and after that he dies on the scaffold. So these are the two main characters. So comparative assessment between these two male characters. So you can agree with the husband, but you must remember that if you agree with the husband, you must also put your logic in support of your judgment. And if you agree with the lover, with Arthur Dimmesdale, with the preacher, you also put your logic. You also provide necessary textual references and information in support of your claim. So the third question is comparative discussion, comparative analysis between these two male characters, and you may have to put your judgment that who is more agreeable as a human being. Say, you can also conclude without agreeing with anybody, or with agreeing both of them, by claiming that both of them had good sides and both of them had certain limitations too. So the third question is on the two male characters. So if you have questions, you can post your questions in the comment section, and I will try to give answers to the comments. So you know that uploading a video is not a very good say style of taking a class, because in a class we have interactions. In an interactive class, it's more lively to talk about things, and as a teacher, I can frame and reframe my ideas, and I can provide information, more I can generate my thoughts, and the class becomes more enjoyable. But say we are in a situation which we cannot avoid, so we have to rely on this online mode of lectures. So bye for now, and post your questions, and shortly we'll have another video on the next topic. Thank you very much.